All right, welcome back to Keepin' a Comic, and we are jumping into the first couple issues of the Ultimates, which is a continuation of Ultimate Invasion and Ultimate Universe. And the Avengers have a very different look. In fact, they're not even called the Avengers. They are called the Ultimates. It is interesting here to see what they do to try to undo what the maker has done to this universe. And there is also a surprise character that shows up a little bit later on too. Now, just as a quick recap here for context, an alternate version of Reed Richards known as the Maker, who is from Earth 1610, who had traveled to Earth 616, had started restructuring and creating his new Ultimate Universe. Number one, making sure that this world did not create any superheroes. Number two, by also setting up the Maker's Council, which was basically his version of the Illuminati that were made up of giant powers that control different sections of the world. Long story short, the Maker was trapped in a large dome due to Howard Stark, who is known as Iron Man. This was followed by a very young Tony Stark, known as Iron Lad in this universe, who is working with Doom, who is the Reed Richards of this universe. Together, they were able to free Thor, who was locked away in an Asgard prison after the Maker had made sure that Loki took the throne instead of Thor. Sif also came along because she said that she was Thor's warden, but personally, I think she just wanted the D. And then later, they went to find Captain America, who was still stuck on ice and was never before discovered. So to preserve what the Maker had created, this lead the Maker's Council to blow up Stark Tower, killing thousands of people, and this was done to frame Iron Lad and create him, labeling him as a terrorist. Now, picking up on where we are in this issue, Tony Stark and the crew escape 6 months into the future when they blew up the Stark Tower. Now, the people think that Tony Stark is now dead, but the Ultimates now have essentially like 18 months to try and fix everything, because at the conclusion of that period, the Maker will have escaped from that dome. Now, time in the dome works very differently there. For the Maker, it would be thousands of years that have passed. Thousands of years to cook up some ish that would be dangerous for everyone else to have to deal with, essentially. So things look a little bleak, right? Number one, Thor was injured back in Ultimate Universe by Captain Britain, and then Captain America is still stuck on ice. There are also a lot of heroes that are missing because the Maker prevented them from being created. And like I said, they only have 18 months to prepare themselves before the Maker comes out to be prepared to kind of go against this superpower that he is. So Tony, along with Doom, have to try and find a way to essentially create the heroes of this universe. So Tony and Doom start cooking up some math and science crap, right? The first thing he does is figure out how to get Cap out of the ice. And with the man being on ice for about 75 years, let's just say that homeboy did not take the news about this new America very well. Now, Thor, on the other hand, is he's still bleeding out because in the very last issue, he got stabbed by Captain Britain, who has that special sword. It also took Stark and Doom Gear about 7 days to create these new origin boxes. They were able to send these back 6 months into the past to try to create the heroes that the Maker had prevented from being created. Now, Cap is not too happy about this because he's like, listen, he's old school. He's like, yo, if you want to start a revolution, you don't use science. You get on the ground and you go start recruiting people. You go start doing the handiwork, right? But of course, he's a scientist, man. Come on, let them do their thing. But they did it anyways, and the results were just not very sexy. They only saw 2 that it worked on. We saw one, which was Spider-Man, who, of course, if you're keeping up with like the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline, then you know what they did there to kind of make sure that that happened. Then also we see Captain Marvel, who it seems had probably killed multiple civilians in this process. Now, Stark had mentioned that the other origin boxes that they had sent back were either rejected, they were either intercepted, or the persons were just deceased. He mentioned that there were a lot of accidental suicides by superpower people, which leaves Tony feeling very guilty, while Doom is just like, listen, man, let's just keep trying again. It's the science, baby. This is the hypothesis. Let's do it. But he still feels very guilty. But then we kind of fast forward here to see Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne, who got these like Ghostbuster looking suits on. So they're exterminators, or I should say like pest control people, who show up at this restaurant to help out, well, you know, doing exterminating problems, right? Only to find out that the owner has trapped these moloids in the basement who look very terrified, I might add. So they tell the owner to go pound sand and then they hop up out of there. But on their drive away, something smashes into their van. Then they find out it was a God's hammer that did it. Now, one of those origin boxes that Tony had sent back to the past starts going off because of this crash. Now, the Ultimates show up trying to explain everything to both of them, because you got to remember that to Janet and Hank Pym, like, they are terrorists. They also thought that like Tony was dead, so they're just like, whoa, and then like, whoa, right? So Tony starts to explain to them what's been going on, how the Maker had prevented them from becoming superheroes, how the Maker orchestrated Hank Pym's brain injury that causes him to have some serious self-doubt about himself, makes him terrified of doing anything, also has him seeing nightmares. Like, he's really a head case here, especially after also seeing what that origin box had showed, like the life that he was supposed to have, all that Hank was supposed to create, the things that he has done, and then unfortunately hurting his wife. Like, he sees all these things from the origin box. That made Hank even more concerned about who he is, which is the reason why he never told Janet that he had received this box 6 months ago in the first place, right? But enough of the chit chat, because Captain Britain and his army show up and the Ultimates have to assemble. And then Janet is trying to convince Hank, like, yo, just do the right thing here. This is what we have to do to make this work. But Hank is just not convinced. But she suits up anyways and starts kicking ass. And I gotta say, man, she looks pretty damn good in that wasp suit. Personally, I always thought the wasp suit had the juice. But either way, while they are duking it out on the battlefield, Hank is going back and forth with Cap about how he doesn't want to suit up. Ireland is getting his ass handed to him by Captain B. By the way, I forgot to mention that Captain Britain lost an eye to Tony Stark. So apart from him being a part of the Maker's Council, Captain Britain, you know, he got a little bit more motivation here towards Tony Stark or whooping his ass, right? And then Thor decides that he's gonna ignore his wound and bring lightning on them suckers, and then injures himself again. Eventually, though, after procrastinating the hell out of he procrastinated the hell out of this damn thing, Hank finally suits up, and I'm like, bro, look at all the things that have been transpiring around you, and you're just sitting here babbling on. Oh no, Janet, oh, but I can't. It's like, bro, shut up and do what needs to get done. So then he turns into Giant Man, stomps on these fools, which then sends a statement to the council, but then also, you know, kind of alerts the rest of the civilians as well. Now, as we move forward here, the Ultimates are seen at the White House on July 4th of all times, right? Like, come on, man. Y'all supposed to be doing some cookouts. You gonna bombard the White House or go to the White House state, you know, on freaking July 4th? Either way. But he's scared. They're like, they show up. They're starting to scare people. There's one lady that says, no, don't kill my daughter. They're trying to explain, like, no, we are the good guys here. Now, Tony had put Captain America through this history chamber prior to them getting to the White House that showed him what happened in the last 75 years. It took him about 9 days to be able to get through the whole entire program, but it radicalized him like no other, which is why you see them here at the White House. Now, the man that's at the helm in the White House is named Midas, who has some old Stark tech on. Midas is basically just all about the money, because of course, everything he touched turns to gold. Oh. Either way, so he orchestrated the assassination of Kennedy just so that he could get into the office back in 1963, and this man has been there ever since. So apparently, presidency runs very different here in the Ultimate Universe, but not a surprise, the Maker has changed so many damn things. Now, he's not a part of the Maker's Council, but he is definitely like interacting with them somehow, because he mentions, you know, his associates, right? Now, Midas, this brother can talk. He starts telling them how America really runs down while Wasp and Giant Man are outside dealing with the guards. He's trying to strike a deal with Cap and Tony. He basically states that everything comes down to money and power. He mentions how the greatest invention is money. Any order in the world has been obtained mainly in the pursuit of wealth, above any politics, above any sort of sentiments. It's all about money. At least it is kind of how the Maker set things up. Now, America technically is not really America anymore either. It's now a part of like the North American Union and regional subsidiaries. But as mentioned before, that is how the Maker set up leaders to lead specific factions of the world. And they basically split up different countries and things like that to run on their particular leadership, right? In fact, the Maker had orchestrated things as such to where they would pick factions around the world that essentially would become the villains for like a generation. So essentially manufacture chaos to unite people against like one superpower, because they believe that people could not live in peace, and there always had to be some power that they had to unite against to focus on something externally, so that they wouldn't focus on the internal affairs that were going on. Now, jumping back to this here, all this talk is just a way to keep the Ultimates from getting what he is truly hiding. So eventually, Tony Stark, he blows up the room to bits, hits and blows a hole through the ground, which they all fall into. Hank and Janet, they are out cold. Now, we don't necessarily know exactly what he's behind, or they don't know exactly what he's been hiding, but we start to kind of see it. There's this woman that is there that is hooked up to this machine with like cosmic radiation surrounding her. Then we see the scene where like Obadiah Stane is shooting Skrull. This is like a memory that Captain America was going through. So that's very suspicious, right? But perhaps this is kind of one of the ways that they were able to gain control of this woman. So Midas says that she is from the future. She powers his suit. They use her to create shields for space shuttles. They use her blood to cure cancers, which of course they are packaging to sell for $10,000 because why? Why not, right? They are also using her power for states and hospitals, airports, traffic systems, you name it. So Wasp, she comes back too, and then she decides to fire at the station that was holding this woman, right? Which then sends Midas into a rage. The Ultimates, though, are all over him. Captain America throws a shield at his head, which then takes him down. And then, of course, later on, he helps get this woman to her feet. And then we find out that this woman that was trapped to this thing is America Chavez. And I'm like, huh? Because she was like, oh, my name is America. And I'm like, okay, well, America Chavez. It gotta be America Chavez, right? Especially with the cosmic radiation. How exactly did they get her is my question. Was it really an accident, or was it something that the maker had orchestrated to happen here? And that is pretty much basically where we end this all at. And we're gonna have to find out what happens next here in issue number 3. What do you think so far? By the way, guys, like and subscribe to the channel here so that you can keep up with the story and other comic stories that we're covering on this channel. Comment down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for kicking it with Keepin' It Comic.